Hey, this is Grant, one half of the Herdsman, coming to you today to talk to you about the other couple of movies that made me cry. Yeah, that video is still going, despite it being, well, in its unedited stage, about 40 minutes. I don't know how long it is now in the future. Um, and those is probably a bad idea. I'm gonna go with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 as the next thing, as the thing to start this part 2 on. And I say it's a bad idea because it's the one that makes me cry the most of all of the things on this list. This is the one that makes me cry the most frequently. And little preface, I'm going to break my rule on it had to make me cry multiple times because while not when I revisit this movie, not all of the same scenes make me cry, but I at least have more than one experience of crying. Yeah, on the first time I saw actually the first two times I saw this in theaters, both times made me cry. Almost the exact same moments even made me cry. A good 4, 5 times. So, if I hadn't said that already, yeah, 4 or 5 times. Um, so let's start off with, well, in no particular order. The first scene that makes me cry is, it's gonna make me sound cheesy, but the first scene that makes me cry is the little speech he has that Ego, or I guess it's a dialogue, the little dialogue that he has, that Quill has with his father. It just makes me cry because, well, it feels like a real relationship. And so often these moments in film just come off as hammy. I mean, you don't really buy the chemistry of these people, but no, this feels like a genuine father-son relationship. And despite the things that are revealed about Ego, um, this still feels genuine. I mean, he may or may not be lying about this, but in that moment, it feels genuine, the sadness he's talking about having to leave Quill's mother, and just the experience of teaching him how to, like, create, I guess is the best way to describe it, like, create an energy ball, like, well, like Dragon Ball Z, when they do that. uh, yeah, I'm still figuring out this camera. Kamehameha. um, they and just seeing them pass the ball back and forth, yeah, made me cry the first time. Um, the other parts that made me cry are like those. There's this scene, like it's the scene that that Yondu, spoiler alert, dies in. Although it's not the line that everybody thinks it is. It's not the "he may have been your father, but it wasn't your daddy." Um, it's the scene where Yondu actually sacrifices himself, and it's Peter's reaction of saying no. Just that just it it screams heartache, because just the idea that he's finally found a true father after this disappointment that is Ego, and then he dies. right in his arms. And next couple of scenes I love because they both make me cry and laugh. It's the funeral scene of Yondu, and when when he mentions when Quill mentions David Hasselhoff, which is like it's like the I lost my marbles joke in Hook. It's the thing they keep beating as if it's this incredibly funny thing. I mean, I'll give it, the David Hasselhoff thing is mildly funny. But it's nowhere near as funny as the writers or the characters even seem to think it is. It's that scene just when Sean Gunn, or I can't remember the name of the character. Uh, it was like Yondu's second in command, where he's screaming, yeah, yeah, about seeing this fireworks display that's it's kind of meant to be a funeral rite, and it was said that these things would never happen for him because Yondu did a terrible wrong earlier in his career. But the fact that he gets honor from the group of people that he considered the closest to his friends. And finally, since finally, the scene that makes me cry is also a scene that makes me laugh. It's the part right around where Groot says, "Welcome to the Guardians of the freaking Galaxy," or rather, where Rocket says, he said, "Welcome to the Guardians of the freaking Galaxy," only he didn't use friggin'. It's right around that part. It's the "I don't want to lose you" that Rocket says, and just that look gets me. The look, first of all, the fact that it's a CG character that is making me cry like this, but the look shared between him and Yondu that's saying, "I know I'm gonna die. I don't care. I am saving Peter." That gets me. And now, before I die of crying, let's move on with the next couple of them, starting with Hook. This is kind of a weird one because it's not actually the movie that makes me cry. It should. It's my favorite movie. Logically, this should be the one that has the most scenes that make me cry in it because it's a very, very beautiful film, but it's not actually the film itself that makes me cry. No, it's the soundtrack to the film that makes me cry. Because when you listen to that in isolation, you truly comprehend how much beauty and passion John Williams put into this. Yeah, this has lovingly been referred to as the movie that John Williams put music in and just kept repeating. It's the music that he wrote and never stopped writing. Meaning, if you look at any film that John Williams has conducted after Hook, you'll notice something. Other than the iconic music in those movies, it sounds like Hook. I mean, besides the classic Harry Potter music of do 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 and stuff like that, it sounds like Hook. And it's the same with Star Wars even. Other than the do 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 do, there is a lot of hook in that movie. But yeah, getting a little off tangent. The parts that makes me cry are the two scenes that I've seen so very often. I can tell you exactly where they are. They are songs 13 or compositions 13 on the soundtrack, and composition. Composition 13 and 14, and it's just some of this hauntingly beautiful music. And it always makes me cry at two specific parts. It makes me cry at the scene in the movie. It's the music specifically, but the scene in the movie where they're trying to decide whether Robin Williams' character, known as Peter Banning, shocker, is Peter Pan. And so they have this little kid who, honestly, the way they play this character, he seems like he's the prophet, that he is the one they worship, like the high priest. That's honestly the best way to describe it. The high priest. They treat him like the high priest sort of character in any situation, like a Lord of the Flies situation. And the music that is played around that scene when they're just looking at Peter, looking at his facial features, see if there's some of Peter Pan in there. And it's the music that swells up right around the part where he says, "Oh, there you are, Peter." And the music that follows, oh, it just makes you cry. And there's some music in the scene that's going to end with him figuring out that he's Peter Pan. It's going to end with him regaining his memories and learning to fly, which has been like the main arc of this movie so far. And it goes... It's just the melancholiness, the melancholiness, the longing, and it makes you cry. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I wish I could hum this to you, but I can't hum it well enough to justify. I can't hum it well enough to do it honor. Other than that, there is one part that it's kind of inconsistent, but I guess it deserves an honorable mention. There is a part in that movie where the character Jack, which is Peter Pan's son, is playing baseball, and it's when he hits the ball and that cheering that happens around that is it like sends shivers down my spine. It makes me cry to a certain degree, but it's mostly that sense of awe that you get during great speeches. The ones in movies like, "Today we celebrate our Independence Day." So like that. But once in a while, it's made me cry. And now on to another video. This is, I believe, no, this is the second TV thing. And once again, like oh, crap, what? Like Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, this is very personal because of the loss of my brother. And this is Doctor Who's Vincent and the Doctor. And honestly, anybody who has not seen the new Doctor Who up to this point, you gotta see it. It's freaking awesome. But yeah, don't start with this episode, because this might actually turn you off. If viewed in the whole, I mean, you don't actually need to have seen any previous episode. I mean, besides one or two references, um, there's not really a lot that you need to be caught up on. That it's there's a reference to a thing that has happened specifically in this season, but you can write that off. Um, the scene that makes me cry, and this is just kind of a melancholy story, because you see, Vincent in the story is Vincent van Gogh. He's going back, the Doctor is going back in time to fight a monster in the time of Vincent van Gogh. And he and, say, the Doctor and his companion, like a sort of like a sidekick, um, they bring him to modern day, which at that point was 2010. They bring him to modern day, and they take him into a place in Paris, a museum in Paris, not the Louvre, I believe, where the best art is put on display. And here's a little thing you actually have to know, which the episode itself says, but for the sake of this video, there's a couple of things there's some things you have to know about me, and things you have to know about Vincent van Gogh. First, Van Gogh, he was a very, very depressed man. He put a lot of work into his paintings, but they were not appreciated in his time. They were dirt cheap. I mean, he's, at least in this episode, I don't know how much of this is fiction, but the way they kind of show how dirt cheap it was, he actually sold them off to pay for his tab. Yeah. And when they get to this museum in modern day Paris, he sees all of his art, and everybody is looking at it, and everybody is loving it. And then they get the museum curator, and the Doctor asks him, could you tell me in 100 words or less where you rate Van Gogh in the history of art? And you gotta understand, Van Gogh was a very depressed man, and he didn't think he made that big of an impact. And the museum curator says to me, I'm going to go through the whole speech, it's that awesome. To me, Van Gogh is the greatest artist of them all. Many people use paint. Okay, paraphrasing now. I haven't seen this in a very long time. It's hard to get through that scene. But he basically says anybody can put pain into their work, but to use their pain to show the beauty and the ecstasy of our world, well, no one had ever done it before. Perhaps no one will again. To me, that strange, wild man roaming the fields of Provence was not only one of the greatest artists, but one of the greatest men who ever lived. After that, they send him back, and they come back to that museum, because you see, in the original history, or in our history, Van Gogh killed himself when he was about 37. And they're hoping they have changed that. And they didn't change that. And when they went back, I think everything, it made me cry, but this really capped it off and connected it to me. And that is this line where the doctor basically tells his companion Amy about his life and about life in general. He says, I always saw life as a mix of good and bad things. Sometimes the bad things don't always outweigh the good things. And then he embraces her and says, but vice versa, that does not make the good things any less important. And believe me, we added to his pile of good things. That just hits me hard. That's exactly how I feel about the death of my brother. And now, moving on from this episode, from this TV episode that has a dear place in my heart. We now move on to Batman Begins, which you might consider odd because while my stuff has been rather geeky, this seems more overt and like, really? You're picking a comic book of a character or of a normal human being that dresses up as a bat? Well, yes, and screw you for anybody actually saying that, because this is gut wrenching. The part in Batman Begins, and it's just one part, and it's the part right after the parents die. It's the part where they're finally at home in Bruce's mansion, and he said, Alfred, it was my fault. If I hadn't been scared, yeah, they wouldn't be dead. And Alfred says, no, it was nothing you did. It was him, the killer, and him alone. I miss him, Alfred. I miss him so much. So do I, Master Bruce. So do I. And to keep with the British people comforting people, actually British people specifically comforting Americans, so another one of those movies, and a highly underrated classic, which, now that I think about it, I'm going to do a video on that. I'm going to do a video on this next one, because it's worthy of it. And that movie is Shadowlands. And it's actually been made twice, but I'm referring to, I believe, the first one, and it is the one with Anthony Hopkins and Deborah Ringer. This is a story about C.S. Lewis, the guy who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, and how he fell in love with this American woman who was, as far as I could tell from the dialogue of the film, a recently divorced single mother. And it's, spoiler alert, she dies. And this is based off of a true story. C.S. Lewis actually wrote a book before he died about his reaction to her death. It's called The Grief Observed. It's actually a rather beautiful book. And the part that makes me cry is actually even a part where the characters are crying. It's this little scene between him and can't remember his name. It's a hard, if I recall right, it's a hard name to pronounce. It's this kid, Douglas Gresham, And that's not the name that's hard to pronounce. It's the actor who plays this kid, but it's a talk between C.S. Lewis, as portrayed by Anthony Hopkins, and this little kid whose actor's name is too hard to pronounce. And it's just this scene of shortly after seeing his mother dying, this little boy is just asking C.S. Lewis, "Do you believe in heaven?" And C.S. Lewis says, "Yes." And then the boy says, "I don't." And then he says, C.S. Lewis answers, "It's all right." And it's just a crying, it's a crying session for both me and for them. And yeah, it's hard to get through, but I still really recommend this movie. And now, gratefully, finally, we are on the last one, and that is Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle. Yeah, I know this is like the last possible film that you would put on this list. I mean, it's like the happiest of the happy. And it's actually a happy cry that makes me cry. It's a happy, if I haven't said that enough, happy scene. It's right when they all come back from finishing the game. And for those of you who don't know this, this is kind of like a reboot of a 1995 film, which is so much darker. Yeah, it makes sense why that one was not as well liked, given that that one was marketed to kids, and there's some Apocalypse Now level PTSD in Jumanji from 1995. But anyway, this is kind of a reboot of that, and in both the 1995 version and the 2017 version, the rules of the game meant that whenever you finish the game, you would go back to the exact moment you left, that you started playing the game. And when they leave, they've changed the timeline of one of the people that they had met in the game. And they meet him again. His name is Alex, and by now he has a daughter. He actually has 2 daughters, and the youngest one is named Bethany after one of the other characters that in the world of the game saved his life. And it just makes me cry because you feel the emotion of the journey these guys have all been on, and to see this girl Bethany, who was like the stereotype of the self-obsessed person who cannot set down their phone because they're always taking selfies. This self-obsessed person saves someone's life, and that affects him enough to say, "You know what? I'm naming my daughter after this woman because God bless her." That just always gets me every time. I watched this back and forth a couple of months ago with the 1995 version, and just going back and forth between these. No matter how many times I saw it, that one scene made me cry every time. And with that said, that ends part 2 of movies and television that make me cry. Hope you liked it, and hope you'll see more of my videos.